This is I've been here for like 10 minutes. I'm inspired by all of you. I think this is, also after hearing the descriptions, I too am super intimidated by all of you. So, so thanks for that. I appreciate it. Really, to have pulled this together so quickly says a lot about the organizers, but it also says a lot about all of you. It says a lot about why I'm so optimistic about things, which is that this is a room full of people, some of you because you want to run for office, some of you because you're just like going, what the heck do we do now? All said, let's come together and figure this out, and that's really inspiring, and it's not probably what the folks on cable news are saying is happening right now. This is a really inspiring thing, and so I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to talk to you about three things. I wrote a very long speech on the plane. So I'm going to talk to you about three things, and then I'm going to answer whatever questions you have. But those three things are, first, for those of you who are thinking about running or thinking about jumping in one way or another, first part is I'm going to talk to you about how you can't time it, that you should throw out any thoughts you have about trying to time it correctly. The second, I'm going to talk about how when you do it, if you're running, you have to run as you. That's your only option. And the third, I'm going to tell you, I know that sounds, for those of you who have run, you would know there are a lot of consultants that believe otherwise. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. But the third is, I'm going to just tell you why I'm optimistic about things. And then I'm going to answer any questions you have. So first, let's start with how you can't time it. So my son, his name is True. He was born in September of 2013. I took office as Secretary of State in January of 2013. So you can kind of tell, based on that schedule, that we had this idea that perhaps we had timed starting a family just right. We thought, all right, now we're starting this new job. We know we're going to live the next 4 years, and it's been wonderful. It's full of joy. Raise your hand if you have kids. Okay, so you know it's also super hard, right? So I'm going to tell you a quick story about the very first night that we brought True home from the hospital. So, you know, the first couple nights, it's like parenting on training wheels because the nurses are there, and so you think you're parenting, but then the first night home, you find out, no, you weren't parenting at all before. So, and my wife gave birth 2 days before this, so she understandably was super tired. I'm super tired for no good reason at all. And you know, we've had that experience of like, he's in the back seat and I'm driving, and it's like I've been in vehicles and convoys in Afghanistan, but this is like the most intense I've ever been. And so we get home and I'm trying to get him to sleep that night, and he was not having it. Like, he was not going to sleep. And he's in this little like car seat thing that's rounded at the bottom, and they said, you know, just rock the car seat and he'll fall asleep. So I'm doing that. I'm doing that till 3 in the morning, and it's like there's a siren going off in my ear. He will not fall asleep. And you know, before we had kids, people would always say to me, they'd say, you know, you're never gonna get any sleep, and you're gonna have to focus when you don't have sleep. And I remember thinking, you know, I was in the Army. Like, I've got a lot of sleep deprivation experience. So I'm rocking this car seat thing, and True is not falling asleep. And then I remember this moment where I laid down on my back and I looked up at the ceiling, and I said something dumb like, I just can't. And my wife walks over and she looks down at me. Her name's Diana. And Diana looks at me and she goes, what do you mean you can't? And I was like, I just can't. And he's screaming. And she's like, and she points to the bed. She's like, go to sleep. And I'm like, no, no, no. She's like, no, you're useless to me right now. Go to sleep. So I crawl under the covers and I fall asleep. And she obviously takes over. So I wake up 2 hours later, and it's dark in the room, but I take a second and my eyes adjust, and I look across the room and I see Diana rocking True in it's called a glider. It's a fancy word for a rocking chair. And he's sleeping, and she's rocking in the dark. And I just whisper, I say, have you been awake the whole time? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, how have you done this? And she says, I don't know, but weren't you trained for this stuff or something? She actually used a very technical Army term for stuff. But there's a camera, so. Anyway, so the point of that story was, we really thought we had timed it, and it was still super hard. And it's still one of the most meaningful things in my life. So for me, the point of that story is whether it's starting a family or running for office or doing whatever the thing is that you care about most, you can't time it. That's not a thing you can do. And the sooner you figure that out, because probably a lot of you, like Robbie was saying, have been thinking about maybe one day maybe one day I'll do this, or this is what I want to do one day, and I'm just waiting for the right time. I'm trying to schedule it around a very ambitious civilian career in whatever you're doing. You know, you don't have that option, really. I mean, particularly now. And I'll just tell you, for me, one of the other very meaningful experiences I've had is serving in the Army. And for me, growing up, I really admired the military. I looked up to my grandfather, who had decided to serve in World War II, and I never met my great-grandfather, but I admired him a lot, because he had done the same thing with World War I. And I'd always admired these folks, and I'd always looked up to people who served. And I had this idea in my head in college, I thought, maybe one day I'm going to do that. And then I was going to go to law school, and I had this ambitious idea of a civilian legal career, and I thought, maybe one day around that I'll serve. And then 9/11 happened, and I just flipped the equation. And I decided, you know what, maybe one day is now, and this is what I'm going to do. And I'll figure everything else out around it or afterwards, and that's what I did. And I'm very grateful for the experience I had, whether it was volunteering to go to Afghanistan or just every day that I had to serve. So whether it's as a dad or as a soldier, the most meaningful stuff in my life has been the stuff that was so important to me that I didn't maybe one day. I just said, it's important enough, I got to do it now. And so that's what I would suggest you do. So that's the first part. The second part is when you do that, if you choose to run or whatever you choose to do, if you're helping a candidate, whatever it is, you got to do it as you. Raise your hand if you are a professional paid actor. Like that's how you make your living. There may be one in here, I don't know. No, okay. All right, well then I'm very comfortable in saying this. You can't act. All right? Don't try. Now this is serious. You think I'm kidding around? The sooner you figure out, as a candidate or as a person helping a candidate, that you can't act, the better you're going to do at this. They have a fancy word for this on TV. They call it authenticity. I call it, you suck at acting. So don't try to act. And here's why that's important. Because Americans see plenty of TV. They see it on their computer. They see it on their TV. They see it in the movies. They see really good acting all the time, which means when they see bad acting, it doesn't just look like bad acting, it looks weird to them. So don't be that person. And now that I'm saying this, you're thinking about a lot of politicians. And you're like, oh, they're a bad actor. That's what's going on. They're a bad actor. So don't do that. You won't enjoy it anyway. So Robbie told you a little bit about our campaign. Maybe a lot of you know about it. But we ran this year in Missouri, and last year, it was a long campaign. We made a decision, I made a decision at the beginning that A, I could not act, and so I was not going to try, and B, what that meant is that as a person who's pretty forward-thinking, basically progressive, I was going to prove that you could run as a progressive and be very honest about who you were and win. Now, it turned out that things were a little different on election day than we expected, so we didn't do the win part, I acknowledge, all right? But it's important. I need you to stay with me. The numbers are important, all right? Secretary Clinton lost Missouri by 19 points. We lost by 3, okay? So yeah, it's a silver medal, but there's a lot of lessons from it, okay? And one of the lessons is that what people really want, what voters want, is to hear what you really have to say. I said the same stuff in Kansas City that I said in Joplin, the same stuff in St. Louis that I would say in Marshall. And what that means is that if I was at a rally with janitors in Kansas City downtown talking about the fact that their wages weren't high enough, talking about minimum wage, that meant later that day I could go to a rural area and talk about, I would go to a small chamber of commerce, right, in a town, and I would talk about minimum wage, and a lot of people there might disagree with me, but I would explain to them that if you raise the minimum wage, in my view, then more of your workers will have more money in their pocket and more ability to buy goods, and that's good for businesses all over the community. Now, did I convert every single one of them to a different position on minimum wage? No, but the reason that we did so well, I got, I think, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, more Trump voters than any Democrat in the country, and I didn't do it by pretending to be a Republican. And when people would leave events like that small chamber of commerce meeting, they wouldn't necessarily have decided they agree with me on the minimum wage, but they would know that I believed what I believed about the minimum wage because I believed it would also help them. And that's important. It is important that people know what you believe, and it's important that they know that they are a part of your plans. That you hold a position that they may or may not agree with, but you hold it because you care about them. And that is not about one demographic or another. You don't have to slice it all up. If you run on what you believe in, and you're honest with people, then you will learn the real secret to politics, which is actually really simple and really similar to the secret to adulthood, which is that if you're real with people, they'll reward you for it. And voters will forgive you holding a position they disagree with so long as they know that you genuinely believe in that position and that you want to do everything you can to make their lives better. That's it. That's the secret. That's it. It's really that simple. So you don't have to act. You shouldn't act. And it all comes down to a really simple dichotomy, which is, look, this is a room full of really successful and impressive people. So you all are arriving at, we all daily really, are arriving at this crossroads in life where you have this choice. And the choice is you can be something or you can do something. And I'll tell you, the people that I'm interested in working with, and the people who make me feel full of optimism, are the people who want to do something. The other thing is that if you have something you want to be, the only way you're going to get there is if your first priority is doing something. So here's what I mean. We all know people who, even after high school, even after college, the only thing they seem to think about is what their resume looks like and what their extracurriculars are. It's like they're always trying to get admitted to school, right? You know what I'm talking about? That is one way, I guess, to go through life. But look, the truth is that, so okay, you talk about being something. I'm the first millennial ever elected to a statewide office in this country. And that is, I guess that's being something. It makes my parents think it's cool. They have an article on the fridge about it, right? But it didn't do anything for anybody. Just being that didn't do anything for anybody. And I didn't become that by setting out to be that. I didn't actually even find out that I had that distinction until I won the Secretary of State's race in 2012. I had something that I wanted to do. And it just happened to be the case that between where I was and doing that thing was running for an office. That's how you need to look at it. So, as you are assessing, those of you who are thinking about running for office, as you're assessing whether to run for office, and then as you're assessing which office to run for, the important question for you to ask is not which office takes me to this place or which office should I run for. It's just, what do I want to do? And any time that you're thinking about an office or any job in terms of what it means and what you're going to be and what it puts in your LinkedIn, whatever, you're doing it wrong. Just think about what you want to do, what that change in the world you want to make is, and figure out what you got to do to make that change. I promise if you do that, you will be more successful and you will be happier. Now, the third thing, and then I'm going to take questions, is why I'm optimistic. So, it's mostly millennials here, it looks like, a lot of millennials, or at least people who are close enough that I'm going to group you all in. I am a millennial by a matter of like 19 months, something like that, and the amount of stereotypes about our generation is numerous, right? It's also the most numerous generation. And the reason that I'm talking about this is, I think that the next few elections, the next several, are really going to be about a pretty central question, which is whether or not there's promise in this generation. That's really the argument that we're having, is whether or not this generation holds promise, or whether or not it's sort of just a matter of these kids today, right? So, just shout them out. What are some of the stereotypes you hear about the millennial generation? Entitled, what else? Lazy, okay. What was that one? Click, I never heard it put as an ism, but clicks. All right, cool. I learned something. Another one. Go ahead.
Narcissistic.
What?
Narcissistic.
Okay, narcissistic or selfish, and okay.
Careless.
Soft, okay, careless. All right, okay, easy. We're good. No, okay. So, I think we all get the point, right? This is the stuff that we hear. Does it irritate you when you hear it? It does me. And it doesn't just irritate you because it's about your generation. It irritates you because it's not accurate. I don't think that there's something wrong with a generation that looks at their paycheck and wants it to be signed by a company or an organization that lines up with their personal identity of who they are. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we are a generation that wants to make the world better and wants to be a part of making the world better. I don't think that's selfish, right? I don't think that that's narcissistic. I don't think it's lazy. I don't think it's any of those things. I think it's admirable. And for me, I've held this view for a long time because serving in the Army, in an all-volunteer Army in this day and age, I serve with an awful lot of millennials. And every time I see a politician say that, you know, people are soft now, that nobody wants to make decisions, or acts like the decisions they're making are so hard every day, I'm offended on behalf of the people I serve with. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about somebody. And some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but I think it's apt. It's about my first few days in Afghanistan. How many veterans are here? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Quite a few. Yeah. These folks who raise their hand, they know that when you go through training, one of the things that happens is people tell you when you get overseas, you're going to have the good stuff. And it doesn't always work out that way. And so when I went through all this training, and then I got to Afghanistan in late '06, October of '06, and I really thought that I was G.I. Joe in the flesh. Like, I thought I was tough as hell. And I was feeling like 10 feet tall. And so when we went through training, we had Humvees, but they weren't armored, and they said, when you get over there, you'll have armored Humvees, and there'll be like a mean-looking guy on top with a machine gun, kind of like what you see in the movies. So that's what I was expecting. So then a few days into my deployment, it was time for my very first convoy, and I was going to go to the camp where I was going to be stationed. And I had what I was expecting, and what pulled up was not that. What pulled up were some unarmored SUVs, mid-size unarmored SUVs, like what many of you drive around, with nobody up on top with a machine gun, soft shell, no armor, and I suddenly did not feel even remotely tough. I felt completely the opposite of tough. And then I started to get queasy. And then in addition to being physically scared, I became scared that I might end up getting sick and being known as the guy throughout my deployment who threw up on everybody on his first couple of days. Go home, take excursions if you're not going to go home. Thank you all very much.